Hi there, and welcome along to episode 109 of the Gersnet Weekly Podcast, the totally free and independent Rangers podcast that is made by the fans, for the fans, where the content is always 100% free. And as we say every week, guys, it's not just the podcast that we have that's free. There's also the website over at www.gersnet.co.uk, where there's all sorts of articles, match previews. We have a very active discussion forum, so please do head over to the website if you've not done so already and get involved. The podcast is going out live tonight. It's Sunday evening. It's 9:30. But as always, the pod will be available for download from Monday morning. And that's on Acast, iTunes, YouTube, Castbox, Stitcher, and even on Spotify. If it's your first time joining us on the show, then a very, very warm welcome to you. And what a show you have picked. It's been a hell of a weekend for Rangers, and we're absolutely buzzing to get going tonight. If it is your first time, then please do hit like and subscribe, and that podcast will drop into your feed every week and you will never miss a thing. Like I say, it's been an incredible weekend for Rangers fans, and we're pretty much going to spend all of the show today discussing the win over Celtic yesterday, which was an incredibly casual, easy affair in which the club never really got out of second gear and never had to, but I can promise you that we will get out of second gear because we've got some first-rate guests this evening. First of all, it's my fellow co-host, David Wren. David, good evening. How are you?
Hello. I feel quite under pressure here because obviously I'm the first guest voice on this fantastic edition of the Gersnet Podcast. But yes, I think like every other Rangers fan, it's been a fantastic weekend. I loved yesterday's game, and even though I was working today, it made no difference. I bought, I think, 3 or 4 Sunday newspapers just to bask in the glory this morning, and read some of the columns and some of the reports and have a good laugh. So no, it's been great, and delighted actually to be on tonight to get to have a chat about this game, because I think there's been a few disappointing ones over the past year that we've had to dissect. So to come on and speak about this, yeah, delighted.
I know the feeling of doing one of these shows after an Old Firm defeat. I think my record at the moment is 3 losses and no wins to then come on and host a show. So I'm sort of breaking my own personal duck tonight, and it's certainly a nicer feeling. Also with us this evening is Iain Duff. Iain, tell me, how do they celebrate an Old Firm win in the darkest English countryside?
Well, obviously they celebrate it. Why wouldn't they? I mean, it's a matter of national celebration, really. But yeah, down here, yeah, it's been, it doesn't, as usual, doesn't touch much on the locals, but I've been doing my best to celebrate on my own anyway. But I mean, you're saying that you've had a poor record on this. I'm on my I've got 100% record so far. I think I was on after the last game at New Year, so far so good.
Right, David's getting a recurring slot on the show. Excellent. Sorry, not David. Iain. I honestly still a wee bit pissed after yesterday, so apologies for that. Right, like I say, normally we'd sort of split the show up into 3 chunks, and we'd have a few different topics, but there's so much to talk about from yesterday's game that I think we're just going to fire straight in. One of the most comfortable wins over Celtic that I've seen in a very, very long time. Me and David were chatting off air about trying to remember when we were last feeling so comfortable about an Old Firm victory. And we're thinking it's at least 10, maybe 15 years. So 2-0, we've now won back-to-back league games over at their place for the first time since 1995. And quite frankly, the boys strutted off the pitch without even having a sweat on. David, we'll sort of go back to the pre-match stuff. And when the lineup came out, what we saw was that David and Kamara were in and that Ryan Jack was on the bench. And then the bigger surprise for me was that Yanis Hadji, who's been involved in a staggering number of goals for Rangers this season so far, was on the bench with Brandon Barker taking his place. Was that the lineup that you expected, or was that a wee bit of a shock for you?
I sort of did expect it, because I'd been sort of thinking about it through the week, and there'd been a few things that I'd seen, and watched, and thinking about the way that Celtic played and how we were going to approach the game. I think the Barker selection was down to the pace that he's got, and the idea that he could maybe cause a few problems for the Celtic defence, especially on the left hand side, where obviously the guy facing Milan ended up starting, but that's been a position I think for them this season. It's been an issue. So wasn't overly surprised to see Barker start. I think Gerrard has a lot of faith in him. I would hate to be negative on this show of all shows, but I don't know where that belief comes from the manager. I've certainly not seen enough, and I'm not going to. I want the guy to do well. I wish for nothing more for him, to do well for us in that position. But for me, it was, it's not working at the moment. I think Jones has made more of an impact than he's played. But in saying that, I think the midfield three was the right option for me because they have been, excellent. Those three. Galatasaray game obviously was a fantastic result and performance from Rangers that day, and I think they earned their start. A lot of people were saying, Ryan Jack would come straight back in, and Ryan Jack's a fantastic player, and for him to stay on the bench just shows how well those three were playing. So yeah, no, I was pretty confident when the team came out, and I think everyone pretty much stood up and was counted. I'm sure we'll come on to the ones that perhaps weren't quite so good, but certainly, I mean, the midfield three were unbelievable. The work rate of Kamara and Harfield was just phenomenal, and I think they will be hard to push out, that team, for big games this season because they've just been outstanding.
Now, Iain, the other thing about the squad that was picked for the game that caught my eye was the strength that we had on the bench. And that was the first time for a long time that I've looked at the bench and really thought that we've got game changers there. We've got strong players there who maybe a year or two ago would be first pick starting 11. How much comfort and confidence does that give you going into an Old Firm game that you have options on the bench and you have strength on the bench that you can rely on?
Well, I mean, that's definitely it. I mean, I think probably a lot of us were maybe not surprised, but disappointed that Barker was starting. But if you look at it the other way, if things aren't going well, I mean, obviously Gerrard had a game plan for it and had a reason for having him picked. If things weren't going as well as he'd hoped, then I would rather Barker went off and somebody came on that was going to be able to change the game. So you could see maybe there's some logic to that as well. But overall, the bench, as you say, it's the strongest bench I've seen for a while, and we're still 2 to 3 at least 3 players to add to that. It's going to be interesting to see how the team sort of develops over the next couple of months, because there's, you look at that starting 11, which you would probably say maybe Barker aside is the strongest starting 11 available at the time based on recent performances. But there's 4 or 5 players that you would say would almost certainly be pushing to be starting in that starting 11. Where's Jack going to fit into that if you look at those 3 central midfielders? But yet, could you realistically say he shouldn't be starting? And that's a great thing. That we haven't been in that position for a long time. So yeah, great to have strength and depth. I mean, that's really what we've been missing for a long time, but last season it was perhaps what let us down at times. And when we had a wee spate of injuries at the start of this season, there was times where we thought, well, have we got the strength and depth that we need? But now that everyone's more or less back to full fitness, then we're almost there as a squad. So all to do now with them, all these new players or players on the fringes starting to gel together, and they're starting to look like they are doing that.
Yeah, and it's a real relief and it's a real change. I think it speaks volumes of the work that's been done by the recruitment team as well to bring in high quality and high caliber. And as you say, Iain, Ryan Jack is a hell of an option, and can you really say that he doesn't deserve to start that game? But it's going to be exacerbated, and we'll come on to talk about it a wee bit more in a moment. But he's not the only person who's going to be fighting for that midfield berth. We've gone out and spent money on Bongani Zungu as well to come in, and Gerrard says he'll be ready to go in a couple of weeks. So there's going to be even more competition for places, and that's
Absolutely.
something that we're seeing across the park. There's 4 good centre half options. There's plenty of good centre midfield options. There's possibly more options up front in the striker position than we would have anticipated halfway through the transfer window. So there's there's competition, and that's surely what you need to win a title.
Because we're not going to go through the whole season, especially this season, almost certainly we're going to be hit with players getting ill. You would imagine there's going to be injuries, suspensions. We need a bigger squad, and that, the fact that these guys are there, and when they come in, hopefully they're going to bring quality rather than just be sort of squad players. Then that's a real positive.
Now, David, I think we better talk through some of the talking points of the game. And the first goal for me has been the best example of Celtic FC's always cheated, never defeated mantra. The first things first, Ryan Kent gets brought down and a free kick is given from which we capitalise. The narrative that we're seeing a wee bit off at the moment is that it was a soft free kick and it shouldn't have been given. There wasn't any contact and Ryan Kent dived. What's your thoughts on that?
Free kick.
Easy enough. Excellent. Yeah. The next thing that we're seeing is that this wasn't a good goal from Rangers. It was a mediocre ball in, and it was a mistake from Shane Duffy. So what's your take on that?
Great goal.
There we go. Excellent. Easy. Go on then. Talk us through that first goal and the movement and how that's all worked.
I don't know if anyone else did this. This might have just been me. But when the goal went in, I was convinced it was offside. So my celebrations were so subdued when he scored the goal. But then, Goldson's been absolutely fantastic. Other than the mistake that he made against Hibs this season, he's taken his game, to another level. And I don't know. He's always been a big lad, but I feel like this season he just looks like an absolute unit and a real threat in the box. And he showed that again yesterday. He was excellent. It was fantastic. Tavernier, it's just been again another one that's just been unbelievable this season. When you look at his play, I watched. I don't know if anyone else follows the Rangers archives on Facebook, but they put up a video of all of games, a compilation of all the league games this season, and Tavernier's just been. You forget actually how the impact he's had, and it's not just assists, it's goals as well. And yesterday, an incredible ball in the box really, and Goldson just outfought everyone to it, stayed onside brilliantly, and put it away. Don't get me wrong, once I saw it again, maybe the goalie flapped at it a wee bit, but it was a powerful header at goal, and yeah, really good. Really good to see his scoring goals from set pieces, because it's been maybe something we've not done quite enough of in the past couple of years. But now we look at real threat, and I think we've scored a fair amount of goals from set pieces this season. Sorry. So yeah, no, it was a great goal. Really good start as well. To get the goal so early on. And yeah, delighted. Really pleased that we're getting, making opportunities for ourselves from set pieces.
I thought the ball in from Tavernier was as good as you can get. It was right exactly where it needed to be. You see that the angle from behind the goal was sort of low down angle, and it just sort of curves in from there. And it's, you couldn't have asked for it to be in a better position. It was absolutely inch perfect. And the thing I liked about the goal was the way that Goldson had basically worked his way. He stood in an offside position pretty clearly, quite deliberately. And when he's standing there, he's sort of forcing the Celtic defenders to make a decision. Do they just leave him there in the hope that he's offside and then run the risk that he comes back onside and he gets a free header? Or do they have to run back to cover him because he's standing there and he's free and he's potentially going to get the goal or get a free header? So he forced them into making that decision, and they kind of fell, as probably as planned, they fell between the two. So one guy runs back and plays him onside, and he moves back into an onside position anyway, and no one goes to mark him. So he more or less gets a free header on it, and I think it was quite deliberate. I don't think you could say that was a necessary. As all goals are, there's always an element of mistake from the defenders, but the way it was worked was quite deliberate, and looked like something that was done in the training field. They'd planned it like that, and the goalkeeper made a hash of it, but it was a good, powerful header, so he may well not have saved it anyway. So I thought it was a brilliant goal, and really impressed. As you say, Tavernier's been superb this season, and he's come back to where he was a few years ago. He was a one-man band really in terms of the attacking force for us, and he's come back to that level again, and long may it continue.
Well, like you say, Ian, it's really nice to see us capitalising on set pieces, and that's something that I don't really remember Rangers doing so much growing up. I always seem to get frustrated at the lack of how much we take our chances from set pieces, and that really does seem to have changed over the last couple of seasons. And like you say, it wasn't a mistake that Connor Goldson was taking up the position that he was, and that probably did work out perfectly. That most of the defenders hold the line and try and play him offside, but one of them breaks and one of them loses their nerve. It's funny that it's one that they spent £2 million and 40 grand a week to loan for a season, and it's funny that it was a goalkeeper flapping at it that they've spent £5 million on. So I quite enjoy those little factors as well, making it an even better goal for me. But it was no accident. It was no fluke. That's the guy has stood there in an offside position as part of a design. And the reports from Oakenhowie are that we have Tom Culshaw dreaming up these set pieces and these routines. And like you say, this is the result of good coaching. This is not the result of Connor Goldson being lucky or even being lazy and not looking along the line. It was entirely planned that way, and it really worked. One other thing that I'd like to say is that there was some analysis on Sports Scene last night after the game of how Rangers tried to use the kind of advanced channels on mainly on the right hand side. So where Ryan Kent was when he was fouled and won that free kick, time and time again Rangers were sort of peppering balls into that area, through balls, long balls to get Ryan Kent or get Brandon Barker running at the ball, because they know that getting Tavernier on the ball there and putting a dead ball in, that's one of his real strengths. And the kind of the game plan in that way, not just in the way that they set up and the tactics and the shape and the formation, but the actual game plan for live situations and scenarios within the game was so well thought out and executed so well. I think that's actually why it made it look so easy, was because of the preparation and the planning that had gone into it. So then, Ian, we'll come to you for the second goal. Now, to me, I don't want to overplay it. It's a wee bit scrappy the way that the ball actually gets in the back of the net, but the build-up and the link-up play before that with Kamara, with Tavernier, with Arfield is excellent. I think that goal for me actually summed up the entire game. Really nice play, really nice build-up, keeping the ball well, and then just wanting it more, because this whole goal came about as the second phase of play from another set piece, which we get to first, and Kamara wins the ball really nicely. So we win that battle. Then the ball gets put in the box, and Goldson has a go and it gets blocked. But then he wins the second ball. So for me, it summed up the hunger and the determination of Rangers above Celtic to win the second ball, to win the second phases of play, and it's paid off. How did you see the second goal?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, and the whole performance, like you say, was about being sharper and being quicker and nipping in and getting loose balls and winning the 50-50s. The criticism that we've had this season, or that we've made this season in certain games, has been we've been a bit too slow. I think just not being sharp enough and not winning the balls when they come into midfield. That was completely the opposite of that yesterday, and that goal did sum it up, because quite easily, if the ball had broken away from the corner, it could have gone up the other end of the park, and the chance would have gone, or we could have been on the back foot. But instead, we won the ball back, and some excellent interplay down the right. The cross wasn't brilliant, but it got to Goldson, and he was unlucky with his first effort. And again, sharp enough to be first to react and get the rebound in. So yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we want. That's what we want to see: our midfielders winning the ball back, winning the ball when it comes out, breaks out of the penalty area, or when there's a loose ball or whatever, and get it back into that danger area. And that's exactly what they did.
I'd just say how satisfying it was to see that camera angle from behind the goal when Goldson slipped his foot just in between Duffy's legs and poked the ball home. That was just fantastic. Really, really great. Considering, the first shot was a real striker's attempt at a finish, and then to get such a scrappy goal like that. Oh, it was just fantastic.
Just reminded me a wee bit of the Morris Edu goal. A bit more dramatic, I suppose, in the last minute a few seasons ago, but it was similar, where it was just a sheer determination to get it and force it over the line.
Yeah, I think I just think for Goldson to be so confident in the 6-yard box, penalty box anyway, is just just incredible. And for him to get 2 goals the way he did, which were, I think Morelos or Ruth or whoever would have been delighted to be 2 goals like that. So yeah, it was just a great day. It really was.
Just a great day. Well, the thing is, David, it could have been even better, and I think the gulf in quality yesterday was quite plain to see. And over the last 5 or 6 years, we've all sat and watched Rangers take a bit of a drubbing against Celtic, and I've seen a little bit of discontent or criticism or dissatisfaction amongst our fan base that we could have had more. Right, we could have really gone for it. Are you disappointed that it was only 2 when this was maybe an opportunity to really go for the jugular and cause some embarrassment?
I see where you're coming from, but I think, up until 80 minutes, it was still sort of, I think our players understand, the way games have gone in years gone by. And there's probably just an aspect of keeping things simple, keeping it, ticking. What I would say is if that Kent chance had gone in, which was a fantastic chance and a fantastic, just again, an amazing bit of play from Barisic and then Kent to catch it on the volley. If that goes in, then you never know what could have happened there. It could have been one of the crazy results like down in England of late. But yeah, listen, I was satisfied with 2-0. I was satisfied with the control we had in the game, because I thought for them to not get, other than that Griffiths chance, for them not to really get anything in the second half or to even look like threatening us. People are saying that it was up to their, down to their lack of idea, lack of sort of guile. I think it was down to the fact that we were in complete control, never lost that control from the first minute of the game. The only 2 times were slight lapses in concentration from Goldson in the first half, and then Hollander just got caught in his heels for the first time in what feels like, about a year for Hollander. And that was the only time. A couple of individual switch-offs there. Other than that, we were completely in control. And I couldn't be more happy with a 2-0 victory of that, and for it to be so straightforward. The scoreline's a scoreline, but anyone that watched that game, you couldn't have argued with a 4 or a 5 now, I don't think.
Do you think that we created enough chances though, David? I mean, both goals have come from set pieces, and obviously that chance for Kent around about the hour mark, which, a foot or 2 either side of where he struck it was flying in the back of the net, and actually could have got lucky because it rebounded and only was about 2 or 3 inches away from bouncing off Morelos into the back of the net. But out with those, was there enough creativity? I thought Ryan Kent was one of his quieter Old Firm performances. I don't think Brandon Barker created a great deal. I think Tav and Barisic obviously were excellent, but out with that, if we hadn't have done so well at the set pieces, do you think we could be coming away maybe feeling a little bit frustrated at the lack of opportunities that were created?
Possibly, but I think what I would say, and I don't really want to be too negative, but we had a front 3, and the only one that was performing at a level was Ryan Kent. And I know you're saying he had a quiet game, but how many times did he bring the ball forward, take on a man, show a bit of courage, which he always shows. But he had a quiet game, but I thought Morelos was quite poor, and I thought Barker was just sort of, he just wasn't really there. He wasn't the only time he started looking like he was coming onto a game was when just before he got taken off. So I thought Morelos' hold-up play, see Parkhead, you need your centre-forward to really bring the ball in close and bring others into play. I felt like there was a lot of flicks and tricks being attempted by Morelos in the first half especially. It just didn't help us, and that's a pet hate of mine in football, when the ball's going up to your striker and he's trying to flick it on to the winger, and it's just, it was never ever getting there. So when you consider that, out of a front three, we only had Kent, and as you said, a quiet game, but I don't think we were magnificent yesterday. Certainly wasn't the best we've played all season, but as I say, that control, and that was down to the midfield, especially Kamara and Arfield, who are everywhere it felt. Arfield's been, what a season he's had, since coming in against Dundee United. He has been our best player. Maybe Tavernier would argue there, but I think Scott Arfield's been incredible. And we'd major control in the game. And yeah, listen, would we have liked to have spanked them 4-0? Of course, but it was no surprise to score from two set pieces, or at least one set piece, and then from a sort of a second phase of a set piece. That was no surprise because we've been doing it all season. We've been getting goals from set pieces, and that's what we practice, as you guys spoke about earlier. That's what's practiced in the training ground. And no, I have no complaints about the goals we scored or how many chances we created, because I think, as I say, for anyone that watched that game yesterday, there was only one team that was going to win it.
I would liken it to a European game, really, to be honest. I think that's the approach we've taken to it. Is we've played that game exactly the same way as we've played away games in Europe, where we're not sitting back and defending. We're trying to control the midfield and creating what we can on the break, or without sort of being gung-ho and charging forward all the time. And as you say, it's about the control. And I don't think I can remember, not even so much even just an Old Firm game, but in any game in the last couple of seasons where I've felt less concerned as the game progressed that we were going to concede a goal or collapse in some way. I mean, there's been times against all sorts of teams that we've looked like that, and it's happened. But I didn't see it at all yesterday, and I thought that was all about the control from the midfield and the defence being strong, and I think it maybe been a wee bit harsh on Morelos and to a lesser extent Barker, maybe, because I think they're both there to do a particular job, and I think Morelos, yeah, you would want him to be banging in goals, maybe, or holding up perhaps a bit better. But I think if you analysed what he did in the first half in particular, I think he did spray it about. He held up the ball. There was a couple of occasions where he was involved in breakaways and passed it out to Tavernier on the right, or there was one particularly good ball out to Barisic on the left, which he swept it across the pitch, and it just the move sort of broke down in the end. But I just think, I would look at that game. If you went away to play a game in the Europa League or one of the qualifiers against one of the bigger teams or in the group stages, and you came away with a 2-0 victory where you looked like you weren't going to concede a goal and you more or less controlled the game, you would say that was a brilliant performance. And I would liken it to that. I think that was the approach we're taking, and we've proved over the last few seasons that that's where our strengths are, is playing, or especially away, playing games like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and actually it brings it on quite nicely to the next segment of the show, where I want to talk about some individuals and some individual performances, and I want to start with Glenn Kamara. Iain, Glenn Kamara to me has been an excellent signing, and of course very, very good value for money, and he deserves a huge amount of praise for his performance yesterday, where I thought he was one of the standouts on the park. The coverage that he was given, all of the back four, but in particular the way that he kind of drifted out towards the fullbacks and covered them was very, very intelligent play, as well as very technically proficient. But Glenn Kamara as well, I think, can tend towards poor performances domestically when he gives the ball away, he makes silly mistakes, he loses possession quite cheaply. But to me, he seems to be a typical big game player. He seems to do very, very well in Europe, and he's done very, very well again yesterday. What are your thoughts, Iain, on Kamara, on his performance yesterday, and how he's progressing through his Rangers career this season?
Well, I mean, what did we pay for him? 50 grand? I mean, that could end up looking like the bargain of the century. That. I mean, I think he's always got a good game in him, and he's not necessarily the player we want if we're trying to break down stubborn teams, because that's not necessarily his game. But in these kind of scenarios, he's an excellent midfielder. He's always maybe prone to making a couple of mistakes a game, and he may even have done so yesterday. One or two passes going astray, but overall, he's very intelligent, can hold the ball up. He's skillful. He's not just a player passes it square or backwards, and he's not just there as a sort of battering ram. He's a very skillful player. He's got a good turn. There's been a couple of clips that I've seen today where you see him where he just leaves 2 or 3 players for dead with a turn. There's a nice little reverse pass he did in the first half, the second half it was, up on the left hand side, which was really nice. And he's got, I think probably confidence is one of the things with these players who have sort of come to us at a time where we've not been doing brilliantly, and maybe there's a lot of pressure on them. As time progresses, if they get the confidence, then they can start performing the way we would like to see them perform. And I think that's evident with Kamara. And as he builds his confidence, he's far more capable and shows more as well. He's not just going to be there doing the easy things. He's willing to do more. So yeah, I mean, what a bargain. And I think Gerrard really likes him, really rates him, and I think he's probably likely to be a regular, despite the other players that could be coming into the midfield.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that there's a good chance that there'll be some significant transfer interest in him come, either come the winter window or again in the summer, because he performs when the spotlight is on, and he just has a real quality and a real hard working side to him that's very, very admirable. The other person that I wanted to talk about, David, is we spoke earlier about Connor Goldson and the season he's having, and the improvements that he's making. But I wanted to ask, what are your thoughts on Philip Hollander and maybe the impact that he's having alongside Connor Goldson? He seems to me to be a very calming presence for Goldson. He very rarely makes mistakes, and maybe what he lacks in pace, he makes up for in footballing intelligence. He reads the game very, very well. He knows when to take risks. His distribution's okay as well, but he's ultimately a good old-fashioned centre half. What are your thoughts on Hollander's season so far?
I think he's been excellent, and it was quite interesting at the start of the season, because when Balogun started in the Aberdeen game, I think there was a real question mark over who would play alongside Goldson, because obviously with Katic's injury, it was up for debate really. But Hollander's been really, really outstanding in many games this season. And I think, yesterday again, I mentioned earlier, one slight slip up when he let Griffiths in, but other than that, I mean, he seldom makes a mistake, as you say, and I just think that's an excellent partnership. And for me, there's no question that's got to be the partnership for the rest of the season. I think we might see a bit more rotation this year compared to last season, because the same players seem to be playing all the time when they were available. But I think Balogun might come in some of the league games, but I would be very, very surprised if we don't see Hollander in most, if not all, of the group stages, barring suspension and injury matches, because I think Gerrard trusts him. I think him and Goldson got a good understanding there, and he's Mr. Reliable. He managed to keep Falcao quiet, at Ibrox a few weeks ago, and really stood up to that task very well. And then yesterday, I just felt like, he had that good tackle in the first half, basically goal-saving tackle almost in the first half. And yeah, he strolled it. And it's been great to see, because I think he was unlucky last season in that he came in, did okay, got injured, and then obviously the season was cut short, and I think there was still question marks over exactly what he was like, and what his sort of future would be like at Rangers even in the summer. And then when Balogun came in as well, but he's come back in and he's cemented his place in the team just through consistent. He's exactly what you want from a centre half. I mean, you look at the way Celtic's centre halves played yesterday. Goldson and Hollander for me would walk into their team at the moment. I think certainly, I would say that Goldson, especially, easily probably the best centre half in the league on current form. I think he's outstanding, and I think Hollander's just helping him to maintain those standards.
Well, I think arguably we've got the best back four in the league. I think Tavernier and Barisic are certainly the best fullbacks, and I would agree that Hollander and Goldson are so composed at the moment, and you just have to look at what they were up against yesterday. Their counterparts in the back three for Celtic, with Duffy, who I thought was dreadful, and the young lad who I was amazed that they threw him in, and obviously, David, we were talking off air about how their shape and playing 3-5-2 was more important than putting their best players on the pitch, and I think they suffered for that. But I'd argue that we have the best back four in the league, in every single one of those positions, and that's probably been the bedrock of the success that we're having this season, because it's now 11 competitive league games done and something like 4 goals conceded. It's quite remarkable, and obviously behind that you've got 2 very, very strong, very capable goalkeepers who are challenging each other and forcing each other to get better and better and earn that jersey. So it's the first time for a very, very long time, and we've mentioned it a couple of times this season, it's the first time for a long time that we can feel real security at the back and not worry about, there's always going to be a bomb scare, or not a bomb scare, but there's always going to be an error or a howler in a defender. That's sort of the nature of the job, and that's the reason they're playing Scottish football rather than English or Spanish or Italian. But it feels like that error, that mistake, that howler is once or twice a season rather than once or twice a month, which is where we've certainly been in the last 3 or 4 years.
Once or twice a game in some cases. I think
it was.
But I mean, I think you're absolutely right. But and what's, if you add to the 4 we've got there, the 2 or 3, I suppose, centre halves that we've got in reserve at the moment, you would be quite happy if fully fit for any of them to come in and fill if there was a need for it. So, we're in a really strong position. Maybe the fullback positions are less strong in terms of backup, but fingers crossed with that won't be a problem. But the centre half situation, and that is in some ways the spine of your team is brilliant. And as I say, we've got 5 really good players. One of them out injured, obviously, at the moment. We've got 5 who can come in, because I quite like Edmondson as well. I think he's he's done, when he's been asked to do his job, more or less, he's been fine. He's a bit rough around the edges, but he's performed well in Europe and in the league. So yeah, I think we're in a strong position there.
Now, the other player that I wanted to mention, he's been brought up once or twice this evening, is Alfredo. Now, Iain, I'm sort of on the same page as you. I thought start of the game he was actually looking really tidy. He was looking hungry, and he was doing really well. And then, second half, things weren't really going his way. He was forced to kind of really come looking for the ball, and sometimes we saw him sitting as deep as Davis and Kamara to come and get on the ball, and then he was doing his usual drifting out wide, and people getting frustrated, saying he's not going to score if he's not in the middle of the goalposts. But really, Morelos is of course in the headlines for apparently lifting his hands at Scott Brown. I mean, to me it's a tickle on the ear rather than a scud round the head. But it's something that he didn't need to do, and it's descended into silliness again. What are your thoughts on? We kind of addressed his performance, but on his behaviour in another Old Firm game where he doesn't hit the back of the net, and unfortunately he's kind of in the news again for the wrong reason.
Well, I mean, I haven't seen any reports. I don't know, so I don't know what's been said about it. But I mean, when I watched it, I thought, well, because of who he is, it's going to get focused on. It's going to get pulled up, and yeah, we could do without it. But to be honest, there was absolutely nothing in it. It's exactly the sort of thing that if it'd been the other way around, if Scott Brown had done it to him, it would be like, oh, he's been clever, he's just trying to wind him up. If the player gets wound up, then he's the idiot. And we heard that before when he was getting studs raked down the back of his legs and things like that. They were saying, oh well, he's got to just learn to live with it. Scott Brown's just been neat about it, and too bad. So I don't really have any concerns about that in itself, other than the fact that it's him, and because it's him, for whatever reason, it gets blown out of proportion and it gets highlighted. And there's always the risk with him that a referee is going to react, because he knows if he doesn't react, then it could be all over the papers for the next week and all over the TV for the next week, and the referee's life will be made a misery. So you can see why referees will be keeping a closer eye on him, and that's why that's my concern when he does these things. And I thought he played okay in the first half. I thought he was okay in the second half when he stayed on. He sort of stopped all the daftness as well. I don't know if someone had a word with him at half time. My concern at half time yesterday was that he was going to get sent off, and I didn't want that to happen. So I wouldn't have been surprised or bothered if he'd been taken off at half time. But his performance was okay. I thought he's a problem. Even if he's not scoring goals, he's a problem for defenders. As long as he keeps the head and keeps the focus, then even if he's not scoring, and to be quite honest, if we won 10-0 yesterday and he didn't score a goal, I couldn't care less. If we win the league by 50 points and he doesn't score another goal for the rest of the season, I couldn't care less. It's part of the team, and if he's performing well enough to get picked, then I'm quite happy with that. I don't care whether he scores against Celtic or not, to be perfectly honest. I don't want him to miss any, but I don't care if it's if other people are scoring, then that's fine by me.
Yeah, I think that's quite a fair way of summing it up. I mean, like you say, I don't know if there's been mass hysteria in the media. I mean, on social media, of course, there certainly has been, because he's raised his hand, but I'm kind of for the same opinion as you. If it was anyone else, it would have been clever. You're trying to wind the guy up, and you need to learn to play the game. And to a degree, he's learning to play the game, because the referee wasn't looking, and he's tried to get a rise out of his opponent. So I sort of think there's bigger things for us all to worry about than Morelos tickling Scott Brown's ear. Now, David, we move away from the sort of individual player performances and what this game kind of means in the wider context of the season. But first things first, this is the first time that we've won back-to-back games in the league at their place since 1995. So it's a very, very long time coming. How much significance do you place on achievements and records like that? And what kind of mental boost do you think that can give Gerrard and the squad?
I think in terms of, the record, it's always welcome, to have records like that, especially when they date back so long. I think in terms of belief, it gives us, I actually don't think since Gerrard came in we've had a great deal of fear when we play Celtic. And that's I think that works itself out when you look at the results in the games thus far under Gerrard. The biggest barrier, or the biggest sort of thing we've got to get over between now and May, or I suppose whenever this season finishes, is beating ourselves. Because how many times over the past 2 years have we got ourselves into really good positions and then lost stupid games against teams that we really should be beating? So we're probably the biggest stumbling block to our own success. And so far this season, we look comfortable in most games, give or take. I think the Livingston game was one just to write off. The Hibs game, we dropped points, we played well. We, have a decent run of fixtures now. They have a few more trickier games coming up. we have the opportunity before Christmas to build up a bit of momentum and maybe a bit more of a lead in terms of points. We've got to now focus on that. And I think, we play Kilmarnock, I think, is it the first week in December, possibly, away from home. And that was one that I pinpointed when I looked at the fixtures. I thought, well, that's where our season has come unstuck. 2 years in a row has been on that plastic pitch at Kilmarnock. There was a game when Jones scored against us. And then there was last season when they scored 2 goals out of nowhere to beat us. So, we've got to ensure that we keep our destiny in our own hands and we, are maintaining a level of performance that sees us build up a few points and gets us, in a position where we're comfortable in the league and that we're not, dropping meaningless, needless points. And the biggest thing is, yesterday you saw Gerrard, talk about we hadn't got a second gear. Well, I didn't say that, but he said we hadn't been at our best. We still managed to win. It's important for the players. It's important for us as fans to not get too ahead of ourselves at the moment. We're allowed to enjoy victories over Celtic as we always have been. But now we go into a big European game on Thursday night and then another game against Livingston at home next Sunday. This has worked out quite well for us this time around because the past 2 seasons when we've played Celtic in the sort of turn of the year and we've won big games, got ourselves level on points, and then we've gone out away for 3 weeks and come back and it's not really worked out. This time we've so many games coming up over the next month in Europe and at home that we need to sort of knuckle down now, build on that result yesterday, but just see it as another victory, which it is, another victory and another clean sheet. We've got plenty of them so far this season. I think the big thing is getting that consistency and ensuring that we're not dropping stupid points because, we want to win this league this season. Forget about what they're trying to achieve across the road. We're trying to achieve, our 55th title, first title since 2011. First major trophies this season is what we want, for many, many years. I personally don't care about what they're doing across the road. I think it's all about us and all about us, battling ourselves and ensuring that we're keeping a level of consistency to win trophies again. Because ultimately, the longer this goes on, the more heartache it gives other supporters. So we need to focus on ourselves, ensure that we're not getting carried away with the highs, but also, when we do drop points like at Hibs, that we're not getting, so depressed and thinking that we're terrible. We've got to find a balance, but also find that consistency, especially in the games we're expected to win. And then anything that we pick up, but any wins in Old Firm games is a bonus on top of that.
I mean, I totally agree with, when you say that we can't get too overexcited about yesterday. Equally, don't get too depressed if we drop points because we're going to drop points. That's the nature of it. The Livingston game was by far the worst performance of the season. Afterwards, everybody was going mental about it, and I thought, well, look, it's not about that game. These games happen. It's how we respond to that game, and if we let it, if the team lets it affect them, then obviously we're in trouble. If they respond in a positive way, they come back and they win the next game, and they win the next game after that, and they put that defeat or draw, as it was, it felt like a defeat, but a draw behind us, then they've learned from last season, or they've learned from past mistakes, and so far so good. I mean, the draw against Hibs, Hibs are third in the table at the moment, or wherever they are, or certainly they were at the time. You're allowed to drop points occasionally. I think we were terrified or some people were terrified because Celtic seem to be quite consistent and we're winning these games. They'll drop points as well. There's no doubt about that. But we've seen that they're not going to be invincible this season. So it's all about, as David said, it's all about what we do as a team and how we respond to any setbacks that come along. We might not do as well in Europe this season. That might happen. Shouldn't let that affect what's happening domestically. If we drop points in Europa League, so be it. We just get on with it, and hopefully that's what the coaching team are going to instill into the players, that they have to just be focused on what they're doing and respond, and don't collapse when things aren't going brilliantly.
I think almost the catchphrase of this season, Iain, has been learning lessons from last time. And actually, it's something that's been a hallmark of Gerrard's entire time at Rangers, has been a learning curve for him. And he wants to make sure that he's learning from the mistakes that he made last time. And, I think we've obviously seen areas that he's tried to address that. He's trying to improve the mentality. He's trying to, he's looked at improving the defence. He's definitely trying to right the wrongs of mistakes he's made previously. And I think that that's probably borne out or evidenced by the reaction after the game at the full-time whistle yesterday. You go back nearly 12 months to the New Year's game where we beat them at their place last year. And it was Gerrard screaming down the camera. It was the whole players sort of running and celebrating with the fans. It was party scenes and it was elation. Now, very sort of muted this time, very understated. It was handshakes and pats on the back and let's get off and get in the dressing room. Do you think that that's solely down to the lack of spectator presence in the stadium, or do you think that this is a marked, deliberate, right, we are not over celebrating now, this is 3 points and this is all it is, let's get back in the changing room, let's celebrate privately, but publicly we're putting on a face that this is a routine win for us, and this is not the defining point of our season. This is one game that we need to win amongst a sea of other games that we need to win.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably a bit of both, to be honest. I think if there had been fans in yesterday, the reaction might have well have been different, and I suppose it's impossible to say that. But having said that, I think Gerrard's comments after the game and his interviews would indicate that he's sort of thought himself, right, I'm not going to open myself up to this again. I'm going to keep a level head on this and pass that on to the players. I don't doubt that when they get into the changing room they celebrated, but they would be quite entitled to. But yeah, I mean, I suppose there is an element of how it's perceived on the outside and how people are looking at it, and whether you like it or not, Celtic might well have looked at how that they reacted, the Rangers management and players reacted after that game, and they might have said, right, well, we'll show them, sort of thing. So if you take anything you can do to take away that sort of extra motivation to your opponents, I suppose is a good thing. But I do think if there'd been fans in yesterday, then it might have been slightly different, slightly more exuberant.
I think you're absolutely right. I'm sure there would have been more exuberance, and I still shudder at that word after 2016. But and we can speculate as to the effect that fans, or the lack of fans, had on the game itself. Obviously, that is the most difficult place for us to go in our league campaign, and not having the Celtic fans there I certainly don't think it's harmed us, but I don't think that our players have been too intimidated by it, certainly over the last 12 months. So maybe it's just another one of these curious things that we'll come across in the course of this very unusual season, is that it just struck me, and you're right, Iain, to bring up the post-match interview. It struck me the difference from last year, when he was very understated, and he acknowledged it's a big game, of course it is, but I very much like and respect the way that the club was treating this. That this is a significant win, and it puts us clear at the top of the table. But it was a game that needed to be won, and next week we have another game that needs to be won. And obviously, David, you've mentioned Livingston and Kilmarnock away, Livingston and then Kilmarnock at Rugby Park, these are the tests that are as important as the Old Firm games when it comes to the league table at the end of the season. It's about picking up 3 points every time, and I think it is in part due to the lack of spectators, but I do think that there has been a lesson learned from over celebrating last season, which gave them some motivation. And obviously we then went into the winter break, which was where the wheels really came off. But David, the reaction again from certain quarters of the media has been that Rangers have beaten Celtic reserves. And Celtic have made a big point of the fact that they had 6 key players, or certainly first team players, missing for the game. And now, first things first, I'm not sure of the last time that those 6 players would have all started the game together. So I certainly don't know that they're 6 key players, but it's probably fair to say that this season, Ryan Christie and James Forrest as well have been 2 of their best players, and Edward obviously does have a good record against Rangers. But to what extent do you kind of buy into that feeling that this outcome could have been very, very different were it not for the impact of COVID and Celtic missing those players?
I don't know. I mean, I get it, and if that happened to us and we'd lost, say 3 of our key players, I'm not going to try and compare, any of our guys to their guys, but I can understand, missing Edward up front and Christie in midfield. I mean, they're good players. There's no denying that. But I don't know. I mean, how much in Cham was about 4 million. Your boy Klamala that played up front was about 3.5 million. El Yanusi, he's on loan from Premier League club. Boy at left back, AC Milan. Shane Duffy, 2 million quid loan or whatever it was. Ayer, who, is apparently worth about 85 million. I mean, I think goalie was 3.5 million. It was an expensive squad they put out. And I think any right-minded Celtic fan would see that they had, enough there. I think the right-minded pundit, or journalists would see that, they had a decent side. And I think that is the case. I think the ones that are going to that old reserves thing make a living out of trying to wind people up, which is sad. And it's not just our fans, I don't think. I think it's, I don't know what the game is there. I'm not going to name them, but I think everyone will know who you're referring to. Seems to be this idea that you've always got to get a reaction because I think it must do something for, your ego or whatever. But yeah, I think anyone in their right mind would see that Celtic were missing a couple of players, but we were missing. I think Iain said this either off air or earlier on the show, but we were missing Aribo and Roof, who, for me, and I know I'm covering all ground here, but for me, Roof is vital to the way we play, and I think he offers a lot more at the moment than Morelos does in terms of, his movement and his ability to rotate in the front 3. So, we were missing someone who's key to the way we play in our formation. And we're also missing Aribo, who on his day is, a fantastic player for us. And would possibly even have started ahead of Barker yesterday in that right midfield role. So,
I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think he definitely would be playing.
I think that you could argue all day about that sort of thing. Edward, let's not forget, I believe was England for a move in the summer, as was Christie. So you can't guarantee that any player's going to make a difference, in a performance where, we were so dominant. And that wasn't about their attacking players. That was about our attacking players in our midfield, causing them problems in all the right areas. So would Christie or Edward have affected that game yesterday? It's really, really hard to say, but there's no guarantees in that. So, like anything in football, you could make that argument about every single football match. But as I say, I think anyone right-minded that watched the game, and I have seen a few things on social media from Celtic fans who've not been of that mind. They've blamed. There's a lot of blame going at their manager and stuff like that. So that Celtic reserves line, I saw it not long after the final whistle, and you just look at it, ignore it, and move on. Because I think that's the best way for it.
And look, as they say, you can only beat what's put in front of you, and we did that with lots to spare. So I don't care whether it was Celtic reserves or not. It was the Celtic first team that was put out in front of us, and we were asked to beat them, and we beat them. So it doesn't matter. Really, it doesn't matter who the individuals were that were on the pitch. It's how we responded and how we played, and that's the only thing that matters. And that try and deflect it a wee bit, but I think we all know the game that's been played there.
I think that's a really good point, Iain. And actually, I think also when you add up the value that they've spent, or the money that they've spent on the players who did play yesterday, with your Ajetis, Klamala, obviously Duffy that they're paying for, the boy from Milan that I imagine is on massive wages, the keeper who almost looks like he's won a raffle to be there. They've spent a huge amount of money on these players. All of them are multi-million pound signings, and that is certainly more than we spent on the players that we put out. And we didn't just beat them. It's, as you say, you beat what's put in front of you. We embarrassed what was put in front of us at their own house, and not for the first time. That's the third game in a row when we've taken them apart. And obviously one of those was the Betfred Cup, which was, a travesty that we didn't win that. So you can make comments about us playing their reserves, or these 6 players who would have made all the difference. And they certainly wouldn't have made all the difference. Not even all 6 of them are even starters. I don't think Edouard would have made a difference yesterday, because their problem wasn't putting the ball in the net. It was creating something. It was creating chances. So maybe Christie, maybe Forrest would have made a difference, but they certainly had enough creative players. They certainly had enough high-value players. And we embarrassed them, because our players are well coached and they're well drilled and they have tactical awareness and they're smart. So look, all in all, it was a very, very successful day, and very, very pleasing to see the meltdown that's come from that. Listen, gents, that's us tipped over the hour mark, and as we suspected, there wasn't really anything else to discuss other than the game yesterday. So what we're going to try and do is maybe get a wee cheeky preview show for the European game midweek. So please do keep your eye on all of our social media channels for that, and over the website at www.gersnet.co.uk. And we will try and get something put together before we head over to Liège on Thursday. The only other thing that I would like to say is obviously a massive thank you to Iain and David for giving up their time this evening. Although I can't think of much that they would rather be doing than talking about that Rangers win against Celtic yesterday. As always, the show will be back next Sunday, when we will be taking a look over Rangers' return to the Europa League group stages, which is going to be a fantastic show. So please do tune in for that. That'll be same time, same place, 9:30 next Sunday. And as always, available to download from the Monday morning. The only other thing for me to say is a massive, massive thank you, as always, for tuning in these very strange times. Please do stay safe. Please do look after yourselves and look after each other. And have a great week.